Hello, and welcome back to the Purposeful Shift, a podcast for women who are exploring how to add a little bit more joy, fun, happiness, or purpose to their daily lives. I am your host, Emma Bryant, and today I am absolutely thrilled to be joined by Sarah Hardacre, who is an internationally renowned artist whose work explores the experiences of women in various environments. Sarah's work has been featured at Sotheby's London and is held in public and private collections around the world, including the British Museum and Damien Hirst's Murder Me collection. Sarah, I am so grateful to you for coming to talk to me today and to share some of your story around how you have ended up where you are today. And I'm sure in doing so, you will be inspiring so many other creative humans along the way. So welcome to the podcast and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and an honour that I might have something to say that could possibly inspire others.
Oh, I'm sure you will. And yes, can't wait to hear your story and to hear all about your journey to date. So on that note, are you able to take us right back to the beginning? Have you always wanted to be an artist?
I love this question because no, I've literally never wanted to be an artist. It's not something I've ever thought about consciously of like I want to be an artist. It was more a kind of inquisitive curiosity that led me down the path to becoming an artist, really. I mean, if we're going to go right back when I was a kid, I was never really any good at drawing or art, but I loved tracing things. And I have really vivid memories of tracing, particularly the dragon, Elliot from Pete's Dragon.
I love that film. It's one of my favourites.
I absolutely loved that film as well. And also the irony now to think that I'm kind of working in collage. This feels like something that was set within my subconscious at an early age, because that film to me is technically a collage with the kind of animated figures appearing in real-time film. The film itself sort of feels a little bit like a collage. But yeah, so I really loved sort of drawing, tracing. I was always really particular about how I put posters on my wall and curated images as a teenager. And I also loved creative writing as well. But then when it came to school, I was terrible at art. I didn't get on with my art tutors. And then later in life, I remember maybe about a decade ago, there was an exhibition at Tate, Liverpool by Jake and Dinos Chapman, who had sat a GCSE in art and not really come through with the most fantastic grades for two of the most kind of influential and famous figures in British contemporary art. And that kind of really hit me as being something that, like, yeah, art is not about being able to draw a crushed up Coke can in the most photorealistic way. And discovering, I can't remember the artist that shit in a tin, and that was art, and the concept of is that shit in the tin or is it not, and that being art, and kind of really blowing open what art could possibly be. So no, really creative as a kid, really then didn't sort of like sit within the GCSE schooling structure, left school and never really thought about it. It wasn't something that I felt was in my life path at all. And it wasn't until I was in my mid-20s, I'd been working for the NHS within substance misuse and an adult drug service, and went over to work with a young person's drug service where, rather than substitute prescribing, we were working around kind of diversionary activities. So if young people were interested in football or music or art, we would then find local groups and ways to engage them in those activities. And as I started doing that and started engaging with various different creative communities around Manchester, I started thinking, I think I want to explore my creativity. And I think there's something within me that's getting really interested in this. And it was through a period of ill health where I was away from work, and I registered for loads of adult education courses, and with life drawing, photography, clay, fabric and textiles. And then eventually start thinking about a university degree. And over the period of probably about a year, I'd built up enough that I had a little bit of a portfolio, and applied to Salford University, or the University of Salford, know which way around that goes, and got on to the BA honours in fine art, and literally have never looked back from that moment. It was the moment that changed my life. All of a sudden being in lectures around kind of non-Western ideas and having a studio space to play and start creating and formatting essays that felt like I was kind of putting my childhood self from school that didn't do very well, kind of like right in the world. And so, yeah, it was something that just sort of happened through curiosity rather than it being a particular desire to, I want to be an artist.
Oh, that's such a lovely story of how I think lots of people probably have that conception that this is what we do at school, this is what art looks like. And if you can't meet those guidelines as to what art looks like. So in my head, that would have been my misconception for a really long time. It's like, if I can't draw, I'm not an artist. If I can't paint, I can't be an artist. And I think it's a really dangerous thing, really, to put into young minds, because like you, fortunately, you obviously found your way to your calling and to your passion. But I guess a lot of people won't. They'll just think that will stay with them. I'm not good enough and I can't do this and therefore I can't be an artist. And all of that creativity that they're missing out on, like you said, you had that space to play and to be free to create. And how much enjoyment you must have got from that, which other people aren't getting if they have that. Those tutors, those teachers are so impactful in our thoughts at such a young age.
Yeah.
I don't know where I'm going with this. It just makes me like mad to think, I'm really glad that you found it, but how can we help other people also find their creative passion?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, this is going back to the sort of 80s. So I hope that the artistic curriculum has changed somewhat and opened up and is a little bit more lenient in considering contemporary art and what contemporary art can be. Because, yeah, that idea that just because somebody can draw very well doesn't make them an artist as well. Mm-hmm. That you could have a really lovely painting or drawing of something, but is that art or is that just a painting? So this tension is something as well that, yeah, I still explore and I still find really interesting. It's interesting when I meet people for the first time sometimes and they say, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I'm an artist. And they'll say, oh, what do you paint? Oh, I don't paint anything. And then trying to tell them that I work in collage and screen print, and it's really difficult. So, yeah, people's kind of very conservative, traditional model of what an artist is, that an artist stands at an easel painting and just makes pretty pictures that go on the wall, is, yeah, very interesting compared to, for me, an artist is somebody who is saying something, who has a message, who's commenting on the world or trying to change something and trying to communicate and convey a message within their work rather than just making aesthetically pleasing images.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's probably stopped me personally exploring what I enjoy in terms of art and creativity, because I would have this mental block that maybe I could draw something and it would be a copy of something else and I could copy it quite well, for example. I'm not saying I can, but just as an example. But to actually think about something, for an idea from its conception and to evolve that into a piece of art, I would say I can't do that. I don't have that thinking and that processing. It's like, I don't know if that's something you have to be taught or if that's something that you either have or you don't have, or that evolves through some structure and some guidance from other people. But I would say that I don't have that creative process bit, but I could maybe produce something that's an imitation of something else. And that for me is really frustrating. And I wonder if that's based on that experience at school, my experience at school being similar to yours in the 90s, that you have, this is how you draw, this is how you shade. If you can't do these, then you can't possibly go on to paint or do other forms of art because you haven't mastered the basics of drawing and shading.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, how we have these limiting beliefs, and it is a really difficult thing to open ourselves up and kind of free ourselves of that.
Yeah.
And yet here you are conducting a podcast, bringing together, opening people up to their creativity. So you definitely have taken something from an idea through to production.
Thank you. Yeah, see, I would still say though, is making a podcast really creative? I suppose it depends on your perception, doesn't it, and how you interpret different things. So, really interesting, and I think I've definitely still got some limiting beliefs around what it is to be an artist, and whether that's something that I could ever be, or whether no, I'm stuck in that that's not for you type mentality. But thank you, Sarah, for sharing that. Sorry for going off on a bit of a tangent again. I always do.
I feel like that in itself could be a whole podcast, to be honest.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there is so much. And obviously, we're both taking a course through Make Institute, which is the MA in Creative Practice. And that's how we came into contact. So thank you. And I think lots of people are probably addressing those limiting beliefs as a part of the process of the course. They've got this desire inside of them, but they need that community to give them the encouragement to put their work out there when perhaps it's just been hidden up until now.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that appealed to me about the Make Happen course, the MA in Creative Practice, is that it's based around a coaching model, really, and kind of quite standard coaching techniques. So it was at a time within my practice where I suppose now I'm maybe sort of 15 or so years into my practice, kind of getting to that point where I'm like mid-career, I guess. I've kind of had, got gallery representation, had exhibitions, had some level of success through that. And then got to a point where I'm like, and now what? And I'm struggling to maintain that. Imposter syndrome sort of sets in as well. And that was what appealed to me about the course, that it's set around this coaching framework where you're coaching yourself and each other as a cohort through uncovering these questions within yourself, answering these questions within yourself, trying things, pushing yourself into the zone of discomfort, as the course likes to call it. Sort of getting out of your comfort zone, confronting those fears, confronting the limiting beliefs and moving beyond them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a later cohort than you, but I've already seen those changes in people, and it's so lovely and powerful to see when people really start to believe in themselves again and share their work and feel the benefits of sharing their work. It's really lovely. I wanted to ask Sarah, I mean, obviously we've talked about some of the things that stopped you in your younger years from almost pursuing this passion that you have. Is there anything now that kind of feels like it's almost like a bit of a block that's stopping you from pursuing your path as an artist? Or do you feel like you got this now, you're on top of this and you know where you're heading?
No, not at all. Not at all. I think the thing that gets in my way at the moment is life. Rent needs paying, bills need paying, food needs putting in the cupboards. And the kind of tension between being in my studio making work that doesn't allow me to financially sustain myself and needing to kind of leave the studio for economic stability is absolutely a tension that stops me from pursuing my path as an artist. Over the last, I'd say sort of 10 years or so, I've been building another strand to my practice, which is as a cultural producer. It still follows very much a similar path to the sort of like processes, if you like, of my visual arts practice, being based in archival historical research, looking to foreground hidden narratives. But that obviously takes me away from my actual visual arts practice. And they're commissions that will be paid commissions, so they help me keep a roof over my head, keep food in the fridge. About 5 years ago, I went out and got my licence as a truck driver as well, which was another way to me to earn money. There's always been those kind of like other jobs that have been a necessity. And I've never been proud about how I earn my money. I've worked in a chip shop, I've been a care worker, I've been a cleaner, bar work. It's always that kind of like something that's flexible that sits alongside the creative practice. And being a truck driver was always a childhood dream that I never thought I could achieve. And 4 or 5 years ago. I don't know if it was menopausal madness that made me realise that I might just be able to do it, or just not caring anymore. I don't know. But went and followed that path. So again, that kind of like need to graft to financially sustain yourself. I've never had Arts Council funding. I've never applied for grants funding. So that is something that 100% gets in the way of just being able to be in my studio and make my work.
Mm. And I imagine, I mean, first of all, I love that you went to be a truck driver because that's so cool. And it feels like it's quite common for a lot of people who are creative to have to look elsewhere for income to support and to get that balance in their life so that they can continue to do what they love. But I suppose for some people, there becomes a point where their art is self-sustaining and they do earn enough money from it. But for a lot of people, that might not happen. They might still be successful, but they still might not earn enough sustainable income to support their lives. So it feels like, I mean, I live in Cornwall, a really huge creative community in Cornwall, and most of the people that I seem to meet have multiple hats. They're working multiple jobs because they're trying to get that balance of life and work that works for them. And it's one of the ideas as well around the podcast is that life is about balance, and lots of us do have squiggly careers, or we do have portfolio careers, or we do have to have lots of different income streams to get the balance that we need for ourselves and to get that creativity back into our lives that makes us so happy.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a real tension. And there are artists out there that do make successes of, you know, their careers and are sustained through it. There's also a lot within the creative sector that the people that tend to get on and are able to get on are the privileged few who have family support, financially able to have that time, or maybe even able to take unpaid internships because they have that family support or something, for example. But the art world is still very much a world that I just saw a post this morning, actually, that sums it up perfectly from Molly Balshaw, who is a Manchester-based artist and one of the co-founders of Short Supply, which is an artist-led group that sort of exists to support artists with their development, really, saying that the art world still sort of relies on ambition, that it relies on artists being ambitious. It relies on us being willing to pay money to just enter our artwork into competitions to be seen. It relies on us wanting to do an exhibition for free for exposure and taking lower sort of like day rates than we would if we were in other sectors in order to get by and put notches on our CV. And it's like, well, that's really great, but exposure doesn't pay my rent. A notch on my CV doesn't put food on my table. But it still does really rely on that. And the people that tend to get by are either privately school educated, have all those connections within the industry anyway, and then it just perpetuates a world where for working class or outsider artists trying to break through, it makes it even harder.
I feel like that could be a whole nother podcast episode as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you for raising that and for also referencing the other organisation in Manchester and the artist Molly. And we can link to these in the show notes as well so other people can.
Short Supply, the work they do is absolutely amazing. The resources that they have for artists, the and support that they have out there, hints and tips on using social media, how to kind of continually develop. And they provide a community online that's fantastic to engage with. So yeah, that'd be a wonderful thing to reference.
Yeah, it sounds great.
Molly and Beck at Short Supply.
And I think, and that kind of leads me on to another thought, really, which is something that came up in conversation that I had with some people this morning about a totally different subject, nothing to do with creativity, but to do with sport, about how that idea that we are so heavily influenced by the people we spend most of our time with. So if we can place ourselves in a community of like-minded individuals, whether it is through the organisation that you've referenced, or whether it's through a course like the MA that we're both taking, or whether it's something locally or online, but that to be around like-minded individuals who are all working towards similar goals can be so powerful and inspiring to help us, especially because times do get tough and we do need a body of people around us who know what we're going through and have a back.
absolutely agree. And I think with the kind of the way the human psyche works, we need experiences mirroring back to us. So if we can be within places where our ambitions and hopes are mirrored back to us through other people who share those aims and objectives, then we are so much more likely to succeed in following our path towards that than if we're surrounded by people who are against that, negative about that, we would then soak up that negativity as well. So yeah, it means a lot having kind of everybody bringing each other up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really important, and again, probably a whole nother podcast episode about the importance of community, especially post-COVID and isolation, loneliness and everything else. But definitely that sense of being around others who make you feel good about what you're doing and who understand why you're doing what you're doing and why you continue to do what you do, even though you have financial challenges or other challenges which make your art difficult at times. Not you personally, just generally. So I wanted to ask you, Sarah, if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about what shapes your work, because your work is so interesting. I remember having a look at your work online and just being like, wow, I mean, where do these ideas come from? And I know, obviously, you've touched on your interest in historical archives. Can you tell us a little bit more about the work that you do now and how the inspiration is developed?
Yeah, absolutely. The mainstay of my practice is based in collage, and it always starts with archival research. So one strand of my interest lies within kind of fascination and love of modernist and brutalist architecture, specifically relating to the post-war period when Europe and Britain specifically were rebuilding building the NHS, rebuilding homes after a lot of bomb devastation, formulating and building the welfare state, and this kind of really utopian time of looking to the future and building something really wonderful and brilliant that was egalitarian and included everybody. And then how a lot of that architecture then over the years was, after that initial building, was really, really neglected. And how the kind of like, how concrete in some ways as a building material came to be connected with class, and how a lot of these estates and housing estates that were built and civic sort of like spaces and areas, then a few decades of neglect by subsequent councils and governments kind of came to be a byword for antisocial behaviour and deprivation. So there's that sort of element. There's also kind of something very much for me about retracing my own working class history through the images. So the first archive I started working with was when I was living in Salford, and it was the Salford Local History Archive, which is just such a wonderful archive. It still has filing cabinets full of images, and you get a little reference card with a number for images you're looking for, and then you're just sifting physically through cabinets and cabinets of images. So there was something very specific about that archive for me as well, that it was very tactile, and that by looking through all of these photos, you were finding other things that you didn't know you were looking for at the same time. And my family history is, my grandparents were mill workers, sort of north of Manchester in Bury and Rosendale. And my grandma was a shop floor union worker and used to come to the TGWU headquarters that was on the corner of the Crescent and Oldfield Road in Salford. So for me, I felt like I was kind of retracing my grandma's steps through a lot of these streets and images. And I also got really heavily into Walter Greenwood, who came from Salford and lived in an area called Hankinson Park, or Hankey Park, which is where he wrote and set Love on the Dole. And how, again, that those kind of slum clearances that a lot of post-war, a lot of housing had been ill invested in. It was considered to be of slum conditions. It was razed to the ground. New, wonderful, shiny flats and buildings were put in their place with indoor bathrooms, running water for the first time. So it's kind of like, it's so multi-layered involved with that architecture. Then the sort of other side of it is overlaying those architectural images. I work with images of women from gentlemen's magazines of a similar era to when the architecture was being built, 60s and 70s. And these women, for me, kind of become a sort of a stand-in for myself in some ways, exploring these territories and exploring these areas. But they kind of stand as strong matriarchal giantesses, adding some sort of glamour into the grit of these areas, but also standing as protection over areas that have been really neglected and forgotten. I'm also really interested with placing those images of women, taking them out of the male gaze of the magazine and putting them directly over the architecture, where they then take up space and almost look directly back out at the viewer. Very much interested in women's place within the man-made world. So for the main, especially in the 60s and 70s, architecture was a man's world. It was male architects that were designing these houses and civic spaces, and not really thinking about what it might be like to navigate those spaces with a toddler, a baby in a pram, a week's worth of shopping, up and down stairs, when lifts broke, what it was like. Going from the back-to-back terraces that might have been considered slums, but you could let your kids out on the street, there were open door policies, all the kids were running around, so then suddenly being in 12, 13 floors up in a tower block where you can't just let your kids out, and you can't keep an eye on them while you're doing housework and they're out playing. So yeah, very much inspired by sort of where women find their place within the urban built environment, and the really complex relationship between women's bodies, architecture and space.
Mm. We'll link to your website, your other socials and things in the show notes, if that's okay with you, so that people can see your work. And because I can picture some of your pieces that I've been able to see as you're talking. And so I think it's really powerful to see some of your work and reflect on what we're hearing from you as well, and to picture how that all comes together and how you brought that together so beautifully. And it is really interesting, isn't it, how you can take that step back in time and take things that in my head would seem like total opposites, like the women from the magazines versus the concrete industrial look, and bring them together to create something really beautiful but really thought-provoking at the same time. And I'm probably not doing it justice, I apologise, but
it's a great
it makes me think. Thank you. So I wanted to ask you, Sarah, have there been times in your life where, even though you're following your passion and you're doing your art, so I suppose in the last sort of 15 to 20 years, where you still maybe felt like there might be a little bit of something that needs to change, or a part of you that maybe feels just a little bit unfulfilled still?
Yes, of course. I think in some ways it's sort of, maybe this is sort of like a two-part question or answer in some ways. I think as somebody who's kind of naturally kind of got ants in the pants and never sits still for 2 seconds and everything's always constantly shifting, there've been loads of times in my life where I've been unfulfilled. Not necessarily with my artwork, but that's maybe more the thing that's needed to change. More kind of unfulfilled with just where I am and what I'm doing. And yeah, I'm always striving for that next thing and that next challenge and the next thing I can learn, the next thing I can develop into, the next step that I can take with stuff. I'm late diagnosed autistic and ADHD, and I think a lot of that definitely comes from my kind of ADHD part of my cognition, that I get bored really, really quickly. I've definitely had a portfolio career. I don't stay at stuff for very long. And I struggle with, when I've taken on kind of commissions within my producing work, that if they're any longer than sort of like a few months, I feel really unfulfilled sticking at stuff for so long. So yeah, that's probably more, the unfulfilled stuff was probably more relating to just life in general. It's stuff you have to do when you're working. Yeah. And constantly hitting those next challenges. I think the things something that needed to change, with kind of maybe relating that to my practice, maybe, is that, God, yeah, I mean, probably one of the reasons I ended up being really interested in starting this MA. For a few years now, I have sort of like thought, God, how long am I going to carry on doing what I'm doing? How long am I just going to be cutting out women from jazz mags all my life and sticking them out of towel box? Is that it? Is that me? Is that what I'm doing? But not really knowing like which sort of direction and which way to go. So recently I have started bringing some changes into my practice and started working with ceramics, which is something that maybe about 8 to 10 years ago, I did a short residency in Stoke-on-Trent, and I was researching the radical women of the potteries. And I made a series of commemorative plates that were water slide decals onto plates from one of the last remaining family-run potteries called Dudson. I think they've closed down now. I think they've gone. And it's a work that I'd always wanted to revisit and revisit those materials. And I've just started getting back into that now. Started working with water slide decals again, working with secondhand ceramics, doing a lot of hand building and hand throwing. So yeah, there is a little bit of a change afoot at the moment within my practice, with a little bit of a shift into ceramics and maybe a little bit of a shift in sort of ideas that are underpinning that as well. Kind of focusing a lot more on sort of women's issues and more feminist sort of ideologies, I guess, looking more at, which I suppose comes out of the HGV driving in some ways, and having inhabited spaces like being a cleaner, working in a chip shop, working behind a bar, doing those kind of jobs where sometimes you're kind of highly visible whilst at the same time being completely invisible, and looking at a lot of the hidden labour of women that women undertake without thinking, being mothers, looking after the house, that there's still this, while lots of things have changed, there are still very traditional gender roles out there, and the sort of like rise of the trad wife again, which is rather frightening and scary. Against the tension of women being told they can have it all. Oh, you can do everything, you can have the career, you can do this, but you're still going to get home and cook tea and do the washing up. And yeah, so it's all still new, and I feel like I can waffle for hours about this while I got my thoughts into some sort of order. But yeah, the ceramics and working with kind of a more labour-intensive material with the clay and the ceramics is helping me shift the materiality of my work, whilst also shifting and changing the theoretical underpinnings of it as well.
Yeah. That sounds really interesting, and a great way to not do a major pivot, but do a slight pivot to keep your interest. And I think as you were talking about ants in your pants and sticking at things, and I was nodding along thinking, yeah, we are very similar in many ways, other than the international artist bit. But yeah, absolutely can definitely relate to fixed term projects and boredom and needing to change. So yes, really interesting to hear you say that and to hear how you've addressed those challenges, because I think there's probably a lot of people, certainly in my circle of people that I've met, who will have similar challenges, and that they're always looking for the next thing, not necessarily because they want the next thing, but because that's just the way their brain works, and they're just always moving and progressing in some way, which I think is probably slightly different to just being a lifelong learner, for example, who's always looking for education. It's always looking for something that's exciting as well. It's like the shiny new object thing, but a little bit more structured in my mind. It's not just distraction. It's more purposeful.
For any way I can sort of like throw a grenade into the middle of my life. And
I keep doing it and do it again. Well, yeah, thank you for sharing so openly and so honestly, Sarah, because I think a lot of people will probably feel similarly at different points in their life, in different scenarios and situations. And so I guess, is there a typical day in your life now, or is every day very different?
No, there's no such thing as a typical day in my life, although that's also really interesting when I hear myself say that, because I love structure at the same point in time. And I do have sort of like structured things throughout my week, like being in menopause. I like going to the gym and training and trying to sort of do something to combat the midriff shift. So I have very set structures around kind of exercise and things like that. No, there is no one typical day. And at the moment, I'm just 2 or 3 weeks out of the back end, having worked for the last 12 months since February 2025, producing a huge cultural event that happened in Tameside, my local borough of Greater Manchester, that was delivered on the 21st. So that was something that kind of ramped up over that 12-month kind of delivery period, from an initial 3 months research and development, and then gradually up to 5 days a week, 6, probably more likely 7 days a week, get everything ready to deliver and get that project over the line. So at the moment now, I'm just in this kind of like post-project burnout, trying to get myself back together and trying to set out what I want to do, where I'm going next. Have a couple of things within my week that I really love. I go to a local pottery studio in Mosley, where I live, with Shelley Wood every Thursday morning. That to me feels like really sacred time, even if that's the only time I have in the pottery studio, that time is sacred, and that is when I focus on my hand building and my making. And I go to another ceramic studio in Stockport called Yellowhammer, with an amazing tutor called Joe, who's just, wonderful. Started learning some throwing there. So I'm just trying to get myself back into a routine of going to the studio. I have a studio at Wood End Mill in Mosley that's about 10-15 minutes walk away from my house. Getting there some days can, even though it's like just a stone's throw away, it can be really difficult. And I can be a bit guilty of just sitting at my kitchen table doing loads of work on my laptop, avoiding actually just sort of like going down. So now there is no one typical day, and that is what I love about the creative life, really, that you have the freedom to make of it what you want.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting. And again, I can see a whole nother podcast episode on kind of techniques to manage life with ADHD or menopausal life with ADHD, because I think that that idea that there needs to be some structure, but there also needs to be lots of empty space, so that you've got, you have your things and you have to have your sacred time, and that's really important. But you also need some flexibility within your timetable as well, which just feels like multiple contradictions that people with ADHD have to manage on a daily basis. So I think it's a whole nother brilliant episode for the future to explore.
Yeah, well, I can't wait to tune into that one, because I definitely need tips on that. I really, really struggle, and most like a typical day would probably be lurching between overwhelm and boredom, and then kind of, I've got so much to do, I don't know what to do. Oh God, no, I'm going to sit here and actually not do anything and just watch some TV for an hour because I'm too frightened of everything that I actually have to do. And lurching between energy to then burnout to then like, that's probably more like what a typical day is like.
Yeah, and I think the procrastination is very real. And once you add the creative element as well, and whether you have a mindset, not you personally, but generally if people have a mindset that actually you need to be in the mood to create rather than and to get yourself to the studio or to that creative space. And then that's another barrier, isn't it, that we have to kind of try and jump over just to get us to a place where we're actually then going to really enjoy being there, but getting there becomes the hurdle. But anyway, I digress again, as always. So I wondered, is there anything, I know we talked a lot about how your art has evolved and what you're thinking about now, and you're moving to ceramics, and how those ideas around that and feminism, etc., might be evolving. Is there anything that you think is, I suppose, missing for you, slightly missing, that you might like to explore as your career as an artist continues to evolve?
Really good question. And in some ways, I'm like, what is missing that I still want to explore? I've always wanted to make really large scale work. So I don't know whether that's something that's missing, but it's something I'd still very much like to explore, is making large scale work. I would love to see one of my collages actually be on, to put like almost a 40, 50 foot tall paste up on the side of a building so that the collage almost exists in real life. But convincing any council to put a 50-foot naked woman on the side of a tower block is never going to happen in my lifetime. I'm still constantly battling Instagram most weeks, who continually censor my work despite it being self-censored. So yeah, large scale work like billboards. I have an amazing book at the studio that my gallerist Paul Stolper put me onto that's all about billboard artwork, and making something huge and kind of going that almost Attack of the 50-foot woman big with my work or be something. But again, that the logistical challenges wouldn't necessarily be the problem, but again, financial money, the nature of my work, it being not acceptable for public spaces, I suppose you could say, would stand in the way of that.
Is that a challenge that you've obviously faced for quite a while? Is that a challenge that sometimes you think, is it worth it? Does it ever make you feel like quitting, or does it, if anything, give you more fire in your belly to keep going and to push harder?
Yeah, if anything, it gives me more fire in my belly to push harder. Especially when it comes to the censorship. There's a couple of really amazing movements. Don't Delete Art, and of course the Free the Nipple campaign, who come together and are doing quite a bit of online stuff at the moment that is all about censorship. And it's still about photograph of a topless man on Instagram. No problem whatsoever, but yet a topless woman, they're just big lumps of fat. What? Just boobs? I don't know. I think, when I look at bodies, they're bodies. I see a body as a body. And yet a woman's body is instantly sexualized for that, which again, another podcast subject all on its own. Yeah, it does make me want to just keep sort of pushing harder and to kind of get around some of these really traditionalist ideas and notions about women's bodies. I've had it sort of recently with a project that came up where work was going to be exhibited within a public setting of a library, and of course my work was deemed unsuitable for those settings, which, okay, I get it. Just bodies. Everyone's got a body. I'm like, our kids seeing that. I bet they spent the first formative years of their life sucking on one of those breasts to be fed from life. This is how life is. These are just bodies. Yeah, so it does make me want to kick against that a bit.
Yeah, that's good that it gives you the drive. And there's so many other issues, aren't there? I mean, what children have access to via mobile devices and the internet is going to be far worse than an artistic trail, of the work that you're putting together that is thought-provoking in a non-sexualized way.
And the kind of context of the situations within which then the art is viewed, where questions can be asked. There's a kind of wider curatorial context going on. I mean, I think one of the other reasons that draws me to working with the images of women that I work with is that contrast exactly. These were taken in the 60s and 70s, before Photoshop, before digital photography. They were taken with film photography. There was no kind of touching up afterwards. Now we barely see any images of women that haven't been filtered, touched up. You can walk down the street and see advertisements for perfumes that are way more erotic and sexualized than the images that I work with within my work. And yeah, like you say, now with the advent of the internet, and back in my day, it was like you find kind of like magazines in bushes in the park, and they were still in brown paper bags on the top shelf of newsagents, or someone might one day find their dad's stash and bring a magazine to school, and we'd just all be like killing ourselves laughing over it. Whereas now you can pick up a handheld device, and within a couple of taps you've seen some of the most graphic, hardcore imagery. And again, within that, where women's bodies and how they're treated, and what that's doing with, young men, how young men then feel towards women, and what's acceptable and what's not.
Yeah, so much there to explore, but your art and the way you present it could be really beneficial from an educational point of view as well, against the harm that young people will be exposed to without any context and without any kind of consideration for what's actually going on in what they're seeing. I know I keep digressing us totally off topic, but I think it's really interesting and fascinating. So I wanted to ask Sarah, is there anything that surprises you about yourself now, perhaps compared to a Sarah from point in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm the kind of person that I just get on with stuff. I never give myself credit for anything I do. Most people will say, like, oh, wow, this is amazing. I'm like, oh, really, is it? Not even thought about it. I've just done it. But actually, you giving me that extra context at the end there of against a version of Sarah from the past. When I think back to where I was when I'd maybe like just left college, when I was sort of like, 18, 19, just starting out in the world, I am surprised with how rich my life is and how, just how abundant life can be with joy and experience. And when you're open to things like that, I think back then I was like 18, what was I doing? I was working in a bank or a building society or something. Thought that was life. And now that, so much more open, so much more experiences happening. And so I think that probably surprises me. And maybe the person that I've grown into from that young woman who didn't have a clue and was just scrabbling around day to day to survive, to like, you can do what you want to do and go after what you want to do and make it work if you've got belief and conviction.
I think that's really interesting, Sarah. Lots to reflect on there, absolutely, especially around what abundance looks like for us and for each of us. And abundance doesn't necessarily mean financial abundance. It can mean abundance in moments of joy in your day. You know, do you have an abundance of things that make you smile, things that make you feel happy? And that can be success and abundance.
Exactly that. That is the word that holds my life. Because I'm certainly not rich with money.
But I think that personal growth to recognise that actually abundance is what we make it, and abundance is our choice. It's not what society tells us that it should be. And I think that's a huge personal growth that a lot of people will go through at different stages of their life. And I think once you've got there, which you obviously have, it must be so great just to know that, you know, my life is abundant with all the things that matter to me, and finances don't need to be one of those, or prestige and success by somebody else's definition doesn't need to be something that is important. Okay, so Sarah, I have a couple more questions for you. The first one's a bit tricky, and I would like to ask you, what is your dream?
Well, I mean, I have lots of them, and my dream today might be different to my dream tomorrow. And might be different to if you'd asked me this yesterday, but today, my dream, I'd love to live abroad somewhere, Spain, Portugal, somewhere lovely and sunny, have a studio where I could work outside, be by the sea. So I think that is just my dream, to be able to live somewhere in the sun and continue making my work with kind of, a very, very simple way of life, just working on my stuff. But it's nice and sunny. I have a studio could be sort of outside. So that is ultimately my dream.
That sounds really good. And maybe some artist retreats to bring other people out to learn some of those amazing skills that you've developed.
Oh no, I don't want anybody else. No, I don't want anybody else there, Emma. No,
on my own.
On my own. On my own. No, nobody else is there. No, that would just ruin the dream. No, that would just ruin the dream, having to do artist retreats and invite people out there. Yeah, sorry, I'm going to be wholly selfish and keep it all for myself. And just,
And why not? That perfect space to just be who you need to be in your own time and space. That sounds idyllic.
I think I'm quite happy being a hermit, to be honest. Just a little cave somewhere, I'll be all right.
As long as there's some sunshine shining into the cave for most of the day. Okay, thanks, Sarah. So my last question is one that I ask everybody. I'm going to ask every guest. And it is, if one woman is listening right now who feels the nudge and wants to make a change in her life, but is feeling scared to act, what would you want her to know?
You're not alone. That you are not alone. Lean into that fear. That is where the magic happens. And there are communities out there. Find your people, and they say a problem shared is a problem halved. So I think we've touched upon it a couple of times within this conversation, with communities like the Make Happen community on the MA that we're doing. There's Short Supply, who are an online community and offer sort of one-to-ones There's another community in Manchester that I get involved with. Islington Mill, which is the Islington Mill Art Academy. There are communities around. Find somewhere, even if that's just going to a class or a pottery studio or life drawing or something. Find a little tribe, find your people and get that community around you. And yeah, you are not alone.
I love that saying, find your tribe. And I think it's such a powerful thing to do. And only once you've experienced, I suppose, the benefits, that sounds a bit patronising, but once you have experienced the benefits of finding your people and being in that group of people, I think that's when you start to wonder how you really managed without those people in your corner before, and how all of a sudden everything that you're scared of just feels a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I love that advice, and I think it's really helpful and practical advice for anyone to apply, whatever their situation is right now and whatever they're looking to change or explore in their lives.
Oh, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be with you today and share some of my story.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I really enjoyed hearing more about your journey and how your work comes to be, and all of the other wonderful tangents that we've gone off on, which I think will be really helpful for various people listening based on feedback that I've received before, because I know some of the regular listeners of the podcast, they just want to know how other people have followed their passions and followed their dreams and made it work. So it gives people that encouragement and reassurance, really, that they can do it too, that then they're not on their own. This isn't something, literally what you've just said, you're not alone. And
yeah, you're not alone. There's nothing mystical about it. It's just grit, determination, and sheer bloody mindedness in lots of ways. I suppose definitely in my instance anyway. But yeah, I really do hope that what I've shared is interesting at sort of worst and helpful at best to your listeners.
Thank you. And I know it will be. Thank you. And we will share in the show notes the various organisations that you've recommended and that you've mentioned, so that other people can follow up with those, as well as your work and what you'd like to share about your work and your practice. Is there anything that you've got coming up that you'd like to do a quick plug for?
What have I got coming up? Just working studio. Got lots of events happening at Woodend Mill in Mosley. We've got our open studios on the weekend of the 6th and 7th of June. So that's an opportunity for people to come along, come and visit me in my studio, see more of my work, chat to me in person. It will be an amazing weekend with lots and lots of events. And as part of Woodend Mill, a small group of studio holders have come together and formed CIC, called Thread and Butter Collective, of which I am a director. We are currently fundraising to turn a weaving shed at the back of the mill that's Grade 2 listed into a exhibition, arts, community space with a cafe that sits along the canal there. So yes, I'm currently working on that, and with that we're going to have loads of really exciting events coming up over the summer. And then hopefully when we get funding over the next couple of years, we'll be developing that space with loads of heritage crafts, learning and exhibitions programme. So I'll also share links with you for that, Emma, as well. And yeah, everybody keep your eye on it. And come and join us at Woodend Mill if you can.
That sounds amazing. Thank you, Sarah. It's been a real honour and privilege to speak to you today and to hear about you and your work. I am extremely grateful to you for sharing your story. Thank you.
It's been beautiful. Thank you for having me on. I've really enjoyed chatting with you.
Thank you so much for joining me today for this episode of The Purposeful Shift. I really hope you've enjoyed my conversation with Sarah Hardacre, who is an incredible artist, and I will link to her resources and those that she mentioned in the show notes. Next week, we're back to a normal solo episode. If you'd like to be notified when that's released, please hit subscribe through your podcasting platform. Thank you so much for joining me and letting me share a part of your day today. Until next time, take care, and I'll see you soon.